So just simply even acknowledging that the poor have mental health is important, because at the moment our society is still largely predicated on the idea that only the wealthy can actually really experience poor mental health because the rest of their life is in such a good shape.
We have to have the children back in school in war footing.
Rising unemployment and the increasing insecurity of employment is a huge cause of worry for most young people in India today.
I wanted to start with Dr. Vijay Kumar. I wanted to ask you, ma'am, your helpline would have seen an increase in the number of calls over the last 2 years related to anxiety and stress. And I wanted to get a sense from you on the kind of calls that you saw more of, and whether there has been some shift in those calls in the last 2-3 months as the pandemic has shown signs of abating.
So definitely most of the helplines have seen an increase in the number of calls. So the kind of calls we saw during the pandemic, initially it was mainly a lot was from older people who were alone, who were afraid, whose children were outside the country, and the majority of them had diabetes and hypertension. Many of them became anxious and perturbed. Next demographic shift happened with young females. Many of them caught at home, facing the interpartner violence, trapped, not being able to get out, and the usual sources of where they could escape being cut off. Then we saw many people working from home having difficulties. Then we saw a spate of students. Now, more than the students, it was the parents, because they became extremely worried about the children getting addicted to gadgets, gaming, Pokemon, Minecraft, TikTok, all that, and that was the thing. Currently, the kind of calls which we are getting now, particularly after the second wave, is a lot of people who have lost someone. Okay, and also we are getting calls from people who have had COVID, have recovered, but still have developed a lot of psychological issues, anxiety, worry, depression, things like that. So this is the kind of change which we have seen over the past 1.5 years.
Dr. Vijay Kumar, you've very nicely encapsulated the various stages of issues that we faced over the last 2 years, right? From the elderly to the young, it's been a ride for everybody. But what you touched about on gender-based violence and women facing the brunt, that has also been seen in terms of loss of jobs, in terms of women not returning to the workforce, and the mental health impact of handling work and home at the same time. So, Tasneem, I wanted to ask you, what policies can we look at, and how do we begin to address women and get them the help that they need at a policy level? What steps do we need to take in that direction?
A lot of those issues were there, right? And they were just exacerbated a lot more with the COVID pandemic. One of the biggest things is talking about it, and finding those spaces where we can talk about women's mental health and bringing it into mainstream dialogue. A simple example of it is training antenatal and postnatal care providers in addressing issues of blues in women. So there's a whole host of things that needs to happen, and it's across the board. It's not just mental health. It is mental health. It is development. It is schemes. It is policies. It is a range of issues that need to come together.
Dr. Patel, I wanted to ask you, again, another thing that Dr. Vijay Kumar touched upon was loss of jobs. Some studies have indicated that direct cash transfers in countries like Brazil and Indonesia have helped in better mental health outcomes in the economically weaker families. Is that something that, as a country, India can look at what are some of the solutions that we can offer to people right now who've lost their jobs and are in distress?
So I think, what I think Tasneem said, acknowledging that the poor also have mental health and they value it is extremely important, because for far too long, we've simply said the poor mental health in poor people is because of their miserable lives, as opposed to the fact that it can actually be due to the impact that poverty has on one's mental health. And because the risk factors are much commoner in poor people, therefore their mental health tends to be worse. So just simply even acknowledging that the poor have mental health is important, because at the moment, our society is still largely predicated on the idea that only the wealthy can actually really experience poor mental health because the rest of their life is in such a good shape. But to your question about the kinds of policies, yeah, there's a lot we can do, and I think it's really important to remember that a lot of that we can do is outside the health sector. And you really pointed out an extremely important example of such an intervention: universal basic income, or conditional or unconditional cash transfers, which are even more powerful. In fact, there is now a very rich body of evidence, as you point out, from Brazil, which has got one of the world's largest cash transfer programs in the world, demonstrating that the direct transfer of cash, which is unconditional, is associated with reduced suicide rates and reduced psychiatric admissions. And I think the impact is the greatest on the poorest, especially in a very divided society like Brazil, on Black Brazilians. And I wouldn't at all be surprised if we would see similar effects of our own cash transfer programs, although ours are conditional, for example, MNREGA. I'm an absolute complete supporter that the world and India itself can afford a universal basic income. But I think there are other things as well, for example, actually universal health coverage. This is of course to do with the health system, and let's not forget that we do not have a universal health coverage system that's accountable, that offers people quality mental health care, and which is free, which is of course a critical part of universal health coverage. You can have individual level interventions, for example, building the competencies in young people in schools to actually address the impacts of poverty as it happens on their mental health. So we should not also just simply think that this will be solved simply by having policy structural interventions. We definitely need those, but we can also twin those with interventions at smaller contexts, neighborhoods, communities, schools, and ultimately at the level of individuals.
One of the things that you touch upon is schools and the role they play in some sort of a role they play in ensuring there's better mental well-being being offered to students. And with school closures over the last 2 years, what's happened, of course, is in rural areas, there's been complete lack of education. And in urban areas as well, with the digital divide, there has been inequalities further widened. So I wanted to ask you, do you think the schools reopening in the midst, now that the pandemic sort of beginning to abate, would school reopening be a good step in that direction?
I completely agree, because every day at least I see either a child in distress or a parent in distress. Because not only the school closure has affected education per se, particularly in rural areas where there are welfare schemes, we have seen more girls have dropped out of school than boys. So there is a huge gender disparity in boys or girls returning back to, even in the returning back to school, we find that more boys are returning back to school than girls. Okay. And the nutrition has come down. The biggest challenge in the urban areas is even it is getting addicted to gaming has actually been worse in lower and lower middle income than in higher income groups. So the gaming addiction has increased by 43% in our country in the last 1 year. 1/3 of the children below 16 are cyberbullied, and 1/3 of them are suicidal, which is a huge number. So I think we have to have the children back in school in war footing, just as we are doing vaccination. The children have to get back to school at the earliest, not only for their education, but for their mental health.
I've been, a very vocal advocate of what Dr. Vijay Kumar has mentioned. I think it's an outrage that our schools are closed. It just shows how little we value schools, and more importantly, how little we value children. We have the absurdity in India that hotels, restaurants, casinos, bars, everything has reopened except for schools. And I think one has to really reflect what kind of society allows a casino or a bar to reopen but keeps schools shut. It's a society that actually really doesn't give a damn about kids. We have treated schools as if those are places that only serve education. Of course, that's fundamentally important for mental health, by the way. If there's one factor that predicts good mental health across the life course, it's getting educated and through many different mechanisms, which I won't go into right now. But it's not just education. Schools are also places where children and adolescents shape their personalities through peer interactions. Schools are places where young people learn how to be autonomous from their parental influences. We've absolutely nixed all that. And, Lakshmi also rightly points out schools in our country are also the places where almost all poor kids get their main meal of the day. So you know what, Vaishali, we as a society have really failed our kids. Parents, teachers, policymakers. We need to reopen now. We need to recognize there are safe ways to reopen schools. But I have always been astonished that teachers were not treated as first-line workers, as frontline responders. They should have been right at the head of the queue for vaccination, as indeed all parents of young children going to school. Imagine if we had just thought of kids first, this is how we would approach the prioritization of vaccination. By and large, kids are almost never affected by COVID-19. And yet they have had to pay the biggest price that society has imposed in terms of locking them out of the single space where they socialize, they learn, they eat, and they receive healthcare.
You've said that the younger people have been facing several mental health issues in the last 2 years, and the mental health impact of the pandemic is sort of higher in the younger population. And that's something that I've, every single conversation I've had with anyone in their 20s to 30s is this generalized anxiety about their future, that lack of jobs, lack of opportunities, what will their future look like, and that fear of, facing up to the unknown. So I wanted to understand, from you, Dr. Patel, and from Tasneem, how do we begin to understand what this generation is going through and how do we address it?
Okay, so Vaishali, I think again, you've really pointed out a fact that we were not prepared for 18 months ago, which is that the young have been much worse affected than any other demographic. And by the way, this is true of every country in the world, including here in the US, where I'm joining you from. Do you remember when the pandemic began, we were all told to look out for the elderly for many reasons, not least that they were the most at risk of the virus's physical effects, but also that we worried about how social isolation and loneliness would affect their well-being. It turns out exactly the opposite has happened. Now, we can ask questions about why that is, but let's focus on the question you have, is why have the young done the worst as compared to any other age group? Well, in part, it's because even before the pandemic, this was a fact. Most mental health problems begin before the age of 24. And during this phase of life, mental health problems account for the largest slice of the burden of suffering due to sickness. So this is a fact that's been around for decades. And so I'm always surprised that we didn't know or expect that exactly the same thing would be amplified during the pandemic. So what worried people before the pandemic? Well, some of the things that have worried them is, first of all, the uncertainty of what happens after first of all, getting into education is in India an incredibly competitive and uncertain process. But after you finish education, the rising unemployment and the increasing insecurity of employment is a huge cause of worry for most young people in India today. The second is the larger societal concerns. Let's not forget, when we were young, when I was young, I can speak for myself, it was a period of hope. And hope means looking to the future with anticipation that this is a world or a society that we will inherit. What is it that is hopeful today if you were 18 years old? We are living in a world that is incredibly hate-filled. It's polarized. We're living in a world where every single day we're told that in another couple of decades, unless we change our behavior fundamentally, there will be no world to save. And of course, there's no signal at all that anyone is changing their behavior in terms of climate change. So there is a sense of despair that I believe is creeping into the lives of young people. And this is also a global phenomenon. A couple of days ago, UNICEF published its State of the World's Children report. For the first time in its history, its entire report is focused on the mental health of children and young people. And I'd recommend that anyone who's interested to understand why we have this tide of mental health problems in young people, look at the report. It really captures the science in a beautiful way, and also, of course, provides very specific, actionable recommendations on how to address it.
Dr. Vijay Kumar, I wanted to ask you, this also more awareness amongst the young people, right? I mean, the young people who are influencers who are talking about these issues. So there's awareness, but there's also lack of places where they can address this anxiety and this fear that they're facing. Is that something that you also see?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a greater awareness, but even though there is a greater awareness, we have found that majority of the young kids, they reach for help in the most inappropriate places. So even when they have genuine problems and they search, they are attracted to these sites which give wrong information, misleading solutions, and they end up with more problems. So the fact is, we have not encouraged the young children to seek help. First step in any mental health issue is self-help, and then you start seeking help. And we have not given enough knowledge to the young people on where they should seek help if they have a problem. Then comes the question of, do we have that kind of services where they can seek help? There is a definite need for providing safe spaces for both men and boys and girls and young women to discuss their mental health issues in a safe, protected environment first. And then the services must be geared up to handle this. Unfortunately, this is the experience of many youngsters. Many youngsters say, yeah, we recognize, I Googled, I did a self-survey, I found that I had depression, but when I went, I was passed off like this, or things like that. And unfortunately, many of them even tell their parents, okay? And the parents don't want to. They are in a state of denial and they say, no, there's nothing wrong with you. Okay, I'll buy you a new phone, or you go for a holiday or something like that. So there is a lack of understanding of the parents also about what the children are going through. And the children themselves have difficulty in seeking out for help. So the first step is to make them seek help for mental health issues.
Right. Dr. Patel, I wanted to ask you, people who are already living with diagnosed mental health issues, for them, the pandemic possibly made the situation much worse. There was lack of access, lack of socialization, lack of, getting in touch with their loved ones, that comfort of having their people around. So is there something specifically that needs to be worked at to target people who are already living with mental health conditions, but, became sort of ignored during the pandemic?
So, Vaishali, I'm glad you raised this question because, people with mental health problems actually not only are more likely to suffer the indirect effects of the pandemic because, it's been tough on everyone's mental health. And so if you already have a mental health problem, you can imagine the impact would be potentially even worse. But actually, they also suffer the worst consequences of COVID-19. One of the more remarkable findings from around the world has been that people particularly with serious mental illness, that when they contract COVID-19, their mortality rates, just like people with diabetes, is 2 or 3 times higher. This means that actually mental illness should have been treated as a comorbidity. You remember that word, which has become part of everyday language. Essentially, you never saw the word mental illness in that list. Recognizing the vulnerability of people with mental illness is extremely important first step. The second thing is to recognize that one of the positive things, if there were anything positive that came out of COVID-19, is the massive migration of healthcare to telemedicine platforms. This was being done in small bits and pieces and by different organizations like SCARF, for example, in Chennai, but really never on the scale that it has made that transition. Today, it is possible to find a mental health professional not just anywhere in India, but anywhere in the world on the click of a mouse. Of course, there are still challenges with this because you have to have still, for example, good internet connection. You have to have a device. But for those who do, it is a completely transformative new opportunity. The other important thing about telemedicine, just to say, is most of the interventions are psychosocial, mostly psychological, actually. Again, if you know how mental health care is organized in India, there's a dominant approach of using medication for everything. And so I think what telemedicine has also done is provided a completely new opportunity for psychological interventions to find their rightful place. We do need to strengthen specialist services for people with serious mental illness, as well as long-term support services in the community for that same group. And of course, my own work has largely focused on the provision of psychological interventions for mood, anxiety, and substance use problems through frontline workers. And so the training and support of frontline workers to do that task, which we're engaged in a number of states in India right now, has to also be extremely important, particularly for the mood, anxiety, that whole spectrum of mental health problems.
I mean, I want to talk more, but we've run out of time. So I just wanted to wrap up. But before we wrap up, I wanted all your thoughts on, this thing about living with the pandemic or living with COVID-19 and, making our peace with it and moving on. It's easier said than done, right? And so I just wanted your thoughts from all of you. Maybe Tasneem can start on how does one do that?
It comes back to the basic premise that Lakshmi, Vikram have both highlighted, that let's go back to the basics. Let's forget the pandemic for a moment. And these are some of the things that we need to do regardless of the pandemic. And the fact that we need to pay attention to our young people. We need to pay attention to a very tattered and a very under-resourced health system. These are fundamentals that need to happen, and when a situation like the pandemic happens, it just hits us in our face because our basic stuff is not in place. So we need to go back to the basics and fix the basic issues. It's not about the pandemic. It's about those basic things that we need to have in place.
Right. Dr. Vijay Kumar?
I think more than any other thing, this pandemic has brought to light the importance of mental health. And that is an opportunity which we have to seize. And we have to look primarily, one thing I would like to say, okay, in all this despairing news, there is a silver lining. I'm sure in India, every year we used to lose about 2,500 students to exam failure. Okay. But last year, I haven't got the official report, but unofficially, it has come down drastically, which goes to show this is an opportunity for us to change this exam. This 1-point exam which determines your life forever kind of a thing. In terms of health system, I completely endorse this. This has also given us an opportunity. For example, the number of volunteers who have been taken for surveillance of fever camps and door-to-door checking and all that. They're all potential health workers. They have been working for the last 1.5 years on that. And they now know something about health issues. Every state has so many of these temporary health professionals. Okay, this is a time where you train them and make them proper health professionals. So that you have straight away a huge number of people who are health professionals who can do this kind of, not only for COVID, for any kind of a surveillance.
Right. I mean, two very important things you said, ma'am. One was on the school systems and the exam systems and the pressures that put students under. So it's time to recall that and to tap into this potential workforce for health services or mental health services as well. Dr. Patel, I wanted your thoughts on the living with the pandemic.
It is now widely recognized that we have to live with COVID. There is no question about this. It is not going to be eliminated. Even New Zealand has dropped its elimination policy. Obviously, how we do it is important in terms of reopening, but we cannot make the vulnerable, like children, victims of our indecision. And I think it's really important that we are clear that children come first. and then come all the other vulnerable groups in our society. In terms of mental health, I think this is a real opportunity to reframe mental health not as a biomedical thing. For far too long, the word mental health is just simply seen as a synonym for mental disorders or mental illness. And that, of course, opens people's minds to thinking about the medical world. But actually, we need to reframe mental health as a public good. It's actually a universal human quality that's important to every one of us at every point in our lives. And it's also indivisible from physical health, which is the other problematic fact of biomedicine, is the splitting of physical and mental health, which of course you don't see in traditional medicines in India, but it's it's an integral part of biomedicine. We need to reunite mental health and physical health so that mental health is provided by every healthcare provider, not just those who are mental health specialists. It's something which is important to everyone. And I would say I would really focus especially on young people. And as Lakshmi rightly pointed out, it's never been as important as today. So it's really a historic opportunity to transform our conversations and our actions on mental health.
We are truthful, unafraid, and independent because of you. Now you can help our reporting from the ground. Go to thequint.com, click Become a Member tab, choose a plan and pay. Because the truth is worth it.